Hello, my name is Carol Durst-Wertheim, and it's my pleasure today to be interviewing a friend and colleague of many years, Miriam Rubin, who came up to Pleasantville for the Garden Club back in October of 2016 to demonstrate some recipes from her latest cookbook called Tomatoes. And she will be doing a demo of one of those recipes a little bit later in this program. So thank you for watching, and Miriam, thank you for coming back in from Pittsburgh and points beyond.
Points beyond. It's lovely to be here. It's a beautiful day. The sun is shining. That's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with your traveling all the way from Pittsburgh to Pleasantville twice in 2 months.
It's not so hard.
Isn't it?
The Grand Central to Pleasantville part is really easy.
Okay.
That's very easy.
And when we first met, Miriam, you were a New York City gal. You were the first woman in the kitchen at the Four Seasons restaurant.
That's right.
You worked at the Leopard. You were starting your writing career here in New York City.
Yes, just after, when I finished the Leopard, that's when I went to Red Book.
Okay.
And that's pretty much when I started.
Red Book magazine?
Red Book magazine, yes.
And you started recipe testing?
No,
already?
I started as the chef in their dining room.
Oh.
But
they had a private dining room for the editors?
They had a private dining, not for the editors, it was for the publisher.
Okay.
And he invited advertisers. And
see.
one time I got to make lunch for Benjamin Spock for his 82nd birthday.
Wow.
So that was great. That was great. We were cutting the cake, and a few of us said, "We're Spock babies. We're Spock babies." So it was a fun time. But on the days that I didn't work, that I might also have been paid for, I got to work in the test kitchen with Elizabeth Alston. That's when she was there, and a whole bunch of friends were there. My friend Sydney and a few other people. We all kind of a nice group together. And that's when I started doing that.
And so I knew you as a member, and we were both members of the New York Women's Culinary Alliance at that point. And so I knew you were freelancing this and doing that. And then something happened, and all of a sudden you're outside of Pittsburgh. And what happened?
Well, it took a while to happen, but what happened was kind of my dream after living in New York for a long time was to have a house upstate. My little house upstate, and I could garden and do things, and I'd come into the city a few days a week. And that would be perfect for me. I thought that was going to be great. But that's not quite what happened. What happened was that I met this wonderful man in Chatham, New York at an antique fair. And we got married about a year later, and he lived in the country.
And not in Chatham.
Not in Chatham. No, he lived where we live now, which is on a very large piece of land, a couple hours south of Pittsburgh. We're on the West Virginia line. We're 5 miles from the Mason-Dixon line. So we're deep in Appalachia. We're in the foothills, and I have a garden. There's a dedication in my book that says, "To David, who gave me a garden," and he did. One of the first things that we did when I visited his house when the weather broke. The first time I visited, it was very cold. But when the weather broke, was to put in the vegetables. We put in onion sets and spinach seeds. And I swear that was the last time spinach ever grew for me. But
So that was how he was wooing you, or were
with
you
a
already
garden.
married?
At that point, were we married? No, we weren't married then.
Okay.
Don't think. No, because if we were married then, I would have been living there.
So you were wooed by the weeds, or wooed by the garden?
By everything, just by the country, and by a wonderful man who could. Well, David's an artist, and he does beautiful work, and he's very inspired by everything around us. So he does pastel landscapes of our trees and hills and the rain and the crazy colors that happen during fall or during early spring. And I'm inspired by that too, and I'm inspired by my garden, and out of my garden grew my column in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.
So tell us about that.
It's called Miriam's Garden, and it's about what I'm growing that week or that month or that season. And it's a great privilege to be able to walk outside and say, I think it's time to write about peas and radishes because they're just about up, if the bunnies don't eat them. And I develop a couple.
Bunnies.
Oh, the bunnies! And I develop a couple of recipes using peas and radishes, or using beets, or using lettuce, or using onions, and that goes with a column that's very organic in feel. Sometimes they just write themselves when I'm really lucky, because it's such an experience to be able to plant a seed and see it come up, and see a vegetable.
So you're not working on a schedule of saying, I'm going to write a radish column. You
Well,
go from the garden first, or you know what's growing?
No, I
which
know
seasons?
what's growing. That's a fanciful way of talking about it. Sometimes it works that way, and sometimes it's not. And it's a little more structured right now. So
Okay.
I have to say, yes, I'm going to write about green tomatoes, which was my last column for this year.
But you also are active with the Southern Food Alliance?
Southern Foodways.
What do you do with them? What is that about?
I go to their symposiums, which are a great place to learn and a wonderful place to meet people. I haven't been to one of those for a couple of years, but I did go to the food media event in Birmingham, Alabama, and it was just a 1.5 day sort of boot camp on writing. And
Is it for professionals only, or is that
Yes.
open to the public?
Well, this was pretty much for professionals. Southern Foodways Alliance is open to the public, but they're usually professionals.
Okay.
It's
Your
hard.
tomato book has a subtitle about Southern, and I wanted to, you just mentioned earlier that you're very close to the Mason-Dixon line. So do you identify yourself now as a Southerner?
Southerner Detroiter?
a Detroiter who I knew from New York City, now kind of becoming a Southerner? Is that
No,
happening?
I have great affection for the South, and I made so many wonderful friends in Southern Foodways. And what I love about Southern food is that it's really endemic to the United States. It has stories and it has a culture, and it's probably our only national cuisine. I really think so. And there are baked beans up in Boston and things like that. But there are a lot more stories down south, and the food is so much part of the culture and part of the people, and so it just appeals to me, I must say.
But growing your own garden, is that part of that process? I mean, you're very far away from
Southern?
Yeah, well, you're very far removed in some ways from New York City, and yet you write and you come to the city all the time.
Yeah.
You're connected, but living a very different lifestyle, a very rural lifestyle, from what you've said.
Yes, yeah.
And how does that transition happen? Was that?
Well,
Isn't it too quiet for you
no,
out
well,
there?
it's so beautifully quiet. We don't hear anything. We hear the birds. We hear the whippoorwills. We hear the deer snorting. We hear coyotes. We can hear somebody coming down the lane.
Wow.
I say, who's that? I don't know that car. It's a completely different experience than being in New York, and that's probably why it's worked so well for me. Had I moved to, I don't know, the outskirts of New Jersey.
Pleasantville?
No, Pleasantville's lovely. Pleasantville's really sweet. I love small towns. But I mean the suburbs.
Yes.
I think I would have not have been happy. But this way I have peace and quiet and garden and nature and sort of freedom from a lot of the strictures that New York puts on you, like walking across the street and trying not to get killed. And then I also am able to come back to New York. And
You've kept your apartment in the city?
yeah, that was a very lucky thing.
Yeah.
So I have a presence in New York, and I come back every couple of months or so, and I walk on concrete, and I go to restaurants, and I see friends. So I'm a woman of two worlds.
That's really quite worked out quite well.
It's very lucky that it did.
Every once in a while you start to tell me about your horses, in our conversation, and I mean, that was a fantasy. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I thought, oh man, someday I'm going to have room for a horse. And
I never thought about horses.
so how do you wind up with this gorgeous white horse and this little tiny horse? Who are they?
The little tiny one he's a miniature horse, and his name is Cisco. And the big one is an Arabian, and his name is Aramis. And I told David no more large animals, but he didn't listen to me because he loves horses. So when I moved there, he had horses. They died. Then we got a rescue horse, and these are also rescue horses. And the brown one is really fat.
The little one.
The little one is really fat, and the white one is deaf and old. And
A deaf horse.
they were abused. We don't know what happened to them. They're very happy now, and they're in a wonderful world. But the white one uses the brown horse, Cisco, as a hearing eye dog, sort of. He looks like a dog. He looks more like a dog than he looks like a horse.
Okay, so the white one takes his cues from the brown one.
That's how he knows it's dinner time, because he watches him.
Wow.
Because you can't call him. He can't hear.
Wow. So that's a very interesting and very different aspect of your life.
Yeah.
But how do they contribute to your life or to your...
Well, as David said, they look good in the field.
They look good in the field.
And it's just another thing that's beautiful and inspiring. Also, the horses contribute to our garden in a great way.
Okay,
For
got
fertility and things like that. We no longer have to, find the manure someplace else.
And you certainly wouldn't be using, artificial fertilizers out in that beautiful countryside.
I might plant tomatoes with a little organic fertilizer.
Organic, okay.
Yeah, when I first put them in.
And have you discovered what things do and do not grow well in your particular climate? Are they different from what we would have here in New York?
Well, you have a shorter growing season.
There. Yeah. We
have a really long growing season.
Because you're south.
Yes, because we're in the south. No, but we're in zone 6A, so it's warmer. We have a longer growing season. I think we usually have our first frost about the middle to end of October. I'm not sure when it was this year. It was pretty much right on time. So what doesn't grow well? I can't grow pineapples.
That would be way south.
And I can't grow tomatoes. And I was thinking about the recipe that we're going to do a little bit later. Yeah. And I was thinking, but when I learned about it, it's called ginger tomatoes, and I learned it from Natalie Dupree, who is, I think, one of the grand dames of Southern cooking. Yeah. And she grows ginger in her yard. But she, of course, lives in Charleston. And she grows kaffir limes and lemongrass. I don't have any good luck with those things.
I've actually seen ginger here at the Pleasantville market that I believe is grown either in a greenhouse or indoors.
Yeah,
but
probably.
In I think in a water base that they root it.
So it's hydroponic? Or they root it in water?
I don't know. It's just incredibly clean and it's very beautiful. So I'm always able to get it fresh at the Pleasantville market.
But you don't grow it?
I haven't tried to.
I guess you could stick it in the ground and see what happens, but it probably wouldn't come back next year.
Gotcha.
It probably wouldn't come back.
So there's another program in the Pittsburgh area that I wonder if you could tell us a little about. Chatham University started a degree in sustainability.
Right.
And do you know much about it?
I know a little bit about it. I know Alice. I've met her a few times. And I've been to the campus, which is just gorgeous. It's Eden Hall, and can't remember how large it is, but it's the place where they used to house the Heinz workers, the women who worked at Heinz.
Wow.
So it's very historic, and I know they built greenhouses there, and they've started all sorts of programs.
I was wondering if you've seen any of the students from that program participating in the food scene or the food culture of Pittsburgh.
Well, there is one who I'm friendly with. His name is Halby Klein, and he works at Pittsburgh Magazine. He used to work for the Post-Gazette. Now he's at Pittsburgh Magazine, and he's the food critic. And the woman I mentioned to you before, the program that I mentioned before, which is called Food 412, she's not from Chatham.
Right.
She graduated from CMU, and she has a few other degrees. But I did want to talk about that because it's a wonderful program. Her name is Leah Lizanardo. It's a real tongue tripper, and her program. Basically, she connects food that would ordinarily go in the garbage, old bread, 3-day-old bananas, something like that a grocery store or a restaurant is going to throw out, and she has runners that go and get the food. They work with Twitter a lot, and the food then goes not to food banks, but it goes directly to soup kitchens and places that need food that can use it right away. So it's a really interesting program. Yeah.
We do have in the city in New York, there's trucks going around City Harvest.
Right.
I don't think we're doing it as effectively in the suburban communities, that pick up and getting food where it's needed. But Is that an issue, do you see, in the rural areas, or are people more committed to growing their own food?
Unfortunately, around me, not enough people grow their own food.
Well, is the soil conducive? Or?
No, most people live on farms or on some piece of land that probably was farmed at some point. I don't think there's enough growing. I live in a very, very poor community, and there's poverty. I don't think there's a lot of hunger. The good thing is that some of the people would be homeless if they lived someplace else. The cost of living is so low.
Gotcha.
So that's
so. I guess my question is, who. You strike me as an unusual one to go from the city to the rural life. Do you see other people of various ages or various lifestyles who are coming back to the land?
No,
in this area?
They don't come back.
They don't come back. So the kids grow up and they move to the urban areas, as we've seen in the U.S. for the last 50, 60 years. Is that still the trend that you're seeing?
Well, the children of our friends, you have to remember that I live in a town that has 60 people in it, maybe, and I don't live in that town. So it's a very small community. Yeah. But the children of our friends that have grown up, they haven't come back, but they've maintained some kind of a connection with it. One of our friends' sons has started a program. Actually, it's a business, and he creates websites for small farms. It's called Small Farm Central.
Wow.
And it's just brilliant.
Yeah.
It's just a brilliant thing. It's his business, and he's written a book about how to get customers. And he has a connection to the farm. I think it was about 3 weeks ago or so, he was at his father's farm planting garlic.
So he's supporting CSAs, community support agriculture, and helping small farmers find their customers. Create
websites for them. And today I got an email from him, and I think it's the end of February is CSA Day. So this is how to get people to sign up to your CSA. So he gets farmers who don't have time to do their business, or who don't have the acumen to do it. He gives them pointers and gives them ways to get customers and keep them.
But that sounds like an interesting way of finding an external life while living in a rural area, much like what you've done. You've stayed in communication with Pittsburgh and New York City while living on the farm. There are some similarities. I never really thought of it that way, I guess. I just see you as such a social person. You're always in a group of people, and for the many years I've known you, right? I see you at events.
Writing is not social.
No, it isn't. So, what might be a next project on the horizon for you after your tomatoes book, which we'll see demoed very, very shortly?
Yes, I have some ideas that are brewing, but I'm just not sure at this point.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm continuing to write for the paper, and I've got an article on latkes coming out.
Okay.
And I keep...
Happy holidays.
Thank you. And I keep demoing and meeting my readers, and that's been great.
Okay. Well, then I will say thank you so much for coming back up to Pleasantville. And
wonderful.
It's always interesting to speak with you. I always learn something different about some different aspect of you. Despite the years that we've known one another, there's always something new twinkling behind
Next time I'm going to interview you, then I'll find things out.
But we'll break here and then set up for a demo.
Okay.
And you'll teach us how to make
ginger
delicious
tomatoes.
Ginger tomatoes. Thank you so
Thanks,
much, Miriam.
Carol. It was great to be here.
Thank you. Hi, we've set up for the demo now. Miriam Rubin is our guest, and she's going to be making ginger tomatoes.
Ginger tomatoes.
Which, what you've just said to me, Miriam, was that this is a recipe you could do at any season.
Yes. It works almost better with supermarket tomatoes because they're a little firmer than with the sun golds that I grow in abundance in my garden, because those they get so soft so quickly and they get so juicy, which is a good thing.
Okay.
But this recipe works. These are tomatoes that I bought yesterday at Italy.
Okay.
And so they have a pedigree, but they're gorgeous. Look at all the beautiful colors, and this is a great way to bring out their flavor.
So you're mincing up about a tablespoon of garlic? Or?
It was a big clove, so I've minced about About 3/4 of it, of that clove, yeah. Yeah, and I'm making a little bit more than the recipe calls for because we have a large skillet here and we want to fill it full of
delicious
food. And then it gets like, I'm going to do about 2 teaspoons of ginger. It's a very forgiving recipe, so you can use a little more of this, a little less of that.
And that looks like the last ingredient is a chive?
These are chives, yes.
That you will use. And that goes in at the end, though, rather than cooking them down?
No. Then they lose all their beautifulness. This is also wonderful with different kinds of basil. It's beautiful with, it's called Rubin basil. I didn't invent it or grow it or anything like that, but it's purple basil, and it's good with garlic chives, or it would be nice with Thai basil. One of the things I love to do is grow different types of basil, too, because sometimes you just don't want to put in another vegetable, because then you have to figure out what to do with it. But basil
goes with everybody.
It goes with everybody, and also, I put a lot of flowers in the garden for the same reason. When there's an empty space, because just to make it beautiful, and basil makes things beautiful, and it smells beautiful, and chives too.
It doesn't seem to be one of the items that people are averse to or have allergies to.
Yeah.
Some people
like cilantro.
Some people have a real particular feeling about cilantro, and basil seems to be very accessible to everyone's palates.
Okay, so that's ready. I'm just going to finish doing these tomatoes quickly so that we have enough. And you can see you can use baby pear and baby plum tomatoes and all sorts of different colors. This also works just fine with larger tomatoes, especially Campari tomatoes, because they usually have flavor and they're sweet, and you can quarter them. So that's another way to approach it. And it makes it nice to have a recipe that you can do all year round, because so many tomato recipes are really dependent on it being dead in the middle of the season. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So this is one of those that works well.
Well, another recipe that you have in the cookbook is the spiced green tomato coffee cake, which was really nice for using those tomatoes that did not ripen at the end of the season.
Right.
And when you were here in October, it was just perfect. The farm market had them. Everybody had the tomatoes that were not going to get ripe, and it was just a great way to use them in a lovely cake.
Well, it's fun. It's fun because it's a really surprising cake. People say, tomatoes? There are tomatoes in that cake? And there's that weird cake, the tomato soup cake, where tomato soup really just stands in for liquid. In the same way, the mayonnaise cake, and there are a few of those quirky little things. But this one, the green tomatoes really have something to do with the recipe, yet they don't take over. They don't taste like vegetables because they're a fruit.
Right. And they go so beautifully with the spices.
Yeah,
it's a very nice, simple recipe to pull together, and a huge yield on it. I think we fed the entire garden club on that.
It was 2 cakes. That's a lot of cake. It's a lot of cake. It's a lot of cake. So I start my tomatoes. I was thinking, when am I going to start them this year? I'm always late. So this year I'm not going to be late. That's one of my goals. And I'm going to tomatoes take about 6 weeks from the time you start the seeds till you put them in the ground. So instead of waiting till May, I'm doing it in April this year for sure.
Okay.
So maybe I can get them in May, depending on the weather. I'm going to start. Hope this feels good. It isn't too hot. May not be hot enough. So because we're doing a little more than one recipe, I'm going to do 3 tablespoons of olive oil. Da-da-da. Okay. Do you have a garden?
I have a garden, and for some reason, wow, do the bunnies love it. And when the bunnies aren't coming, the woodchucks move in. And I've actually watched a deer do a leap, standing still, jumping over a 6-foot fence to get in to whatever was there. So I've started to move in this area toward fruit trees, toward some blueberry bushes, and just trying to get things that I won't have quite as much weeding
Heartache.
and heartache about. Thank you very much. Heartache is the word.
We grow blueberries. This is not quite hot enough. I'm going to heat it up more, but I'm putting the garlic and the ginger in, and I'm going to cook them till they are fragrant. We grow blueberries and raspberries. It wasn't a great raspberry year, but it was going to be a wonderful blueberry year. And we cover the whole bush with white row cover, so it looks kind of ridiculous. And but unfortunately, and it was going to be great. I would open it up and I'd look in, and it was a sea of beautiful blueberries. And then one day I looked in, and there were no berries left. Chipmunks.
Chipmunks.
Chipmunks. This is not very hot yet, but it smells good. It's just
already starting
to smell good.
Gain fragrance, and you
Yeah.
don't really want it golden brown. You don't want color on this.
No, but I do want it to sizzle a little bit, and the fragrance will change slightly,
Okay.
but not brown, because then it's so quick to burn.
Goes
at
right
that
to burn.
point.
Yes.
At that point. So I grow garlic as well.
Do you?
Yes.
And the hardneck, or what
Yes.
kind goes for you?
The hardneck, because it does best in our part of the country, and we do onions, beautiful onions that I'm still using. There's some purple ones that this was the first time I grew them this year, and it's a torpedo onion, so it's kind of elongated, and they did beautifully, and I still have a basket of them.
Do you have a particular seed source that you like?
I plant plants, and I get them from, I think it's Dixondale Farms. I think that's where all the onion plants come from.
Okay.
Usually people do sets, and sets don't work well for me. Sets are last year's onions, plants are this year's onions, and they're very tiny. They're like filaments, so they take a while to put in, but they do really well. This is
Are we getting warm here?
Am I doing this correctly? I keep turning it up. It worked last time. I think we could take a bath in there. Yeah.
It's hot.
It's hot.
It's hot.
It's hot. It's warmish. It's kind of warmish. One of the
I'm hearing it.
there we go. Yeah.
I'm hearing it.
If we don't watch it, it'll work, right? A watch pot.
It's one of those things with cooking. You have to use all the senses. So
Right.
generally, you start your oil, and if you don't hear your sizzle, you know you're not ready to go into
You
it
feel
yet.
disappointed.
Yeah, but there you are. You've got a sizzle, my dear.
People often ask me what we grow, and it's easier to say what we don't grow. The one thing we don't grow is corn.
Aha. Because of animals again?
Because of the raccoons.
The raccoons.
The
like corn.
raccoons. The raccoons. They have a party in the cornfield. Oh, this is
There we are.
is cooking now.
We're there now.
So I just keep stirring it and stirring it. One of the things that did really well this year were cucumbers, and I make a lot of pickles.
Aha.
This looks beautiful. All right, so now I'm going to put the cherry tomatoes in. Wait another minute just to get it hotter. See, it's working. And these are different size.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to put these in too. So I make bread and butter pickles. I make processed pickles. I make pickles in the crock. And for some reason, it was just a great, great, great cucumber year. You never know what it's going to be. Now, this is this wonderful salt that you brought that
It comes from your neighborhood.
it does. One of our former house sitters used to work it's called Dixon, and it comes from Malden, West Virginia, and the salt is mined there, and Thomas Keller uses it. So things get around.
If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for us, right?
That's right. So these don't cook for very long. I'm going to put a little more salt in. And they're getting all the flavor of the ginger and the garlic. And you just want to cook them until they start to collapse and the juices start to come out and the skins start to get soft. And the reason we cut them in half is because if you've ever eaten a whole cherry tomato, the whole sautéed cherry tomato, you will understand why. Because you burn yourself. The juices explode in your mouth and you're like, it's not a good feeling. But so you can see, I'm going to hold this up a little bit. You can see that it's starting to get really wonderful and juicy. There. we tried sweet potatoes a couple years ago. Our neighbor grows them. Ours weren't quite so successful. Our neighbor up the hill can grow things that we can't. Figure that out.
Is that microclimate or just different grounds?
different temperament.
Yeah, well, that too.
Something microclimate. I don't know what it is, but they have wonderful fruit, and they grow nuts and really delicious sweet potatoes. This is looking pretty good. So we're going to finish it as soon as it gets nice and juicy. It smells great.
How do you know if you want to use honey or not? You have honey in your recipe.
You have to use honey.
You have to use honey.
It's a secret ingredient. It is because it brings all the flavors together. It brings the aromatics of the ginger and the slightly assertiveness of the garlic, and it brings out the sweetness of the tomatoes. Okay, so these are starting to break down, and we are done. And then we add honey. And it's not very much. It's about, and this is always the most difficult part because the honey never comes out. And I've been at more demo tables trying to squeeze the honey out of the honey bear. There. That's about enough. It's about 2 teaspoons. See?
And it keeps cooking in the warm pot.
And we don't have a fork.
We don't, so I get to use that great big spoon to taste it.
All right. Okay, and the chives.
Oh,
remember,
just
that could
beautiful.
be beautiful purple basil. It could be little purple borage flowers.
Just gorgeous.
Which we also grow in our crazy garden. Every year I look for something different and fun. Okay,
just
Carol.
Beautiful.
There's your spoon.
Ah, great big pot with a great big spoon. It may need a little more
salt, I can't tell you. A little more salt from West Virginia. Which I have to get you some more of. Is it good? Okay. All right, great.
Just wonderful. And I want to say thank you again, Miriam Rubin, for coming back to Pleasantville. How can we get your cookbook, the tomato cookbook, if we would like to try this delicious dish?
Well, the cookbook is available through the University of North Carolina website. That's who published it. It's part of a series called Savor the South. And there are other wonderful single-subject books under the same series, like chicken and pecans and bourbon and buttermilk, but tomatoes, of course, is my favorite. So it's the University of North Carolina, or, of course, you can get the book through Amazon. Or if you want to contact me through my website, I can sign one for you personally and send it to you. I'd be glad to do that.
And the website is miriamrubin.com.
Thank
you very much.
Thanks.
Miriam, that was a terrific demonstration.
Thank you.
It was more interesting for me now than the one that you did at the garden club, because this time I could get to see it.
You were worrying about things then.
No, in October, actually, I was in the kitchen. I think.
That's where you were, probably cleaning up the mess that I'd made. Tomatoes are very messy.
They're messy, but they are so delicious, and I love the color. I love the sparkly flavor of the fresh and very simple ingredients. So thank you very much for this demo, and I do hope everybody watching will try Miriam Rubin's wonderful ginger tomatoes. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Carol.
for coming.